Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for this live community call on Microsoft Purview Data Security Investigations, which is now generally available. Today, we'll take a closer look at enhancing data security investigations with Microsoft Purview, focusing on Purview Data Security Investigations, DSI. My name is Claire Becker, and I'm here today with Christoph Feisinger, the Principal Squad Leader on the Microsoft Purview team. DSI enables customers to quickly uncover and mitigate data security and sensitive data risks buried in their data using AI-powered deep content analysis, both proactively and reactively. With DSI, security teams can identify investigation-relevant data, analyze it at scale with AI, and mitigate uncovered risks in a single unified solution. We'll go over 4 demos, showcasing sample workflows for a proactive investigation, a reactive one, an agentic workflow, and steps to getting started today. But first, let's start with why data security investigations. In our next slide here, the impact of data breaches is multiplying. In 2024, 1.3 billion victim notices were issued, a 211% increase from 2023. Simultaneously, there's a worldwide cybersecurity shortage. 4.7 million cybersecurity professionals are needed worldwide. All this and more are contributing to how long it takes to fully resolve a data breach. In 2024, it took nearly a year, 292 days, to identify and contain a breach that involves stolen credentials. Introducing Microsoft Purview Data Security Investigations. Organizations have shared how challenging data security investigations are today. That's why we built Microsoft Purview Data Security Investigations, a new solution that enables data security teams to identify investigation-related data, investigate with AI-powered deep content analysis, and mitigate risk within one unified solution. Data security investigations uncovers key security and sensitive data risks and facilitates secure collaboration between partner teams to mitigate those identified risks. This simplifies the previously complex and time-consuming tasks, and what once took months can now be done in a matter of hours. Data security investigations expands Microsoft Purview's existing best-of-breed data security capabilities. Our information protection, data loss prevention, and insider risk management solutions give hundreds of thousands of Purview customers a strong foundation to protect their crown jewels, their data. And now with data security investigations, customers can reimagine how they investigate and mitigate data security incidents, accelerating the investigation process post-breach. It's important to note that while this expands our data security offerings, there's no prerequisites to using data security investigations. We've heard lots of great customer feedback throughout private and public preview. One customer that used data security investigations proactively was Toyota Motor North America. To learn more about DSI and Toyota Motor North America's experience, view our Ignite session here. We'll send the link in chat. DSI was also featured in Ray Reyes' book on mastering Microsoft Purview deployment in the era of AI. He emphasizes how DSI leverages the speed of AI, one tool helping SOC teams and data security teams triage incidents in hours, if not minutes, instead of what once could have taken weeks. Data security investigations is already making a big difference with customers. We've heard a lot of great use, including proactive credential scans to identify files containing credentials like passwords, or reactive use cases, whether post-data security incident to understand the severity and sensitivity of the data, or post-internal fraud or bribery incident to discover the suspicious communications. As you can see, the product's AI-powered deep content analysis can be powerful to solving many different problems within an organization. We've found DSIs primarily for data security admins and teams who investigate sensitive data exposure. SOC analysts are also very relevant to data security investigations. However, in some organizations, SOC teams don't necessarily want access to the sensitive data itself, while in other organizations they do. Across the board, SOC analysts are interested in the output of data security investigations so they can triage and prioritize incidents with a view into sensitive data exposure. Most of the time, also, we found data compliance teams are not always quite the right stakeholders, though there is always variability across organizations. I'll pass it off to Christoph now, who will take us through some demos.
Great, thank you, Claire. And again, hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. So Claire introduced why DSI and how it could help you mitigate data security risk. Let me show you a couple demos of the product that just launched. And again, when I'm saying launch, we reach general availability, which is, it meets our quality bar and has all the latest features. And that was last month, but we've been in public preview since April of last year. And that's where we got all that great feedback that Claire was sharing in terms of use cases and the quote from Toyota Motor Company. Now, typically, a little diagram before I start. As Claire was mentioning, there's two sides of this challenge that you have. Is either the one that's very common, which is you already have an incident, an attacker's in your house, you get a breach, and you need to figure out what did they access to understand how you can make it. So that's what we mean by reactive, and I'll demo that. But what I want to start with is the proactive use case, which is do I have a risk, latent risk potentially in my organization? And if someone with the wrong intention, either internally or an attacker gets a hold of that data, I could be in big trouble. So that's what we mean by proactive versus reactive. Now, obviously, in both use cases, and that's what you're seeing in the diagram, I can start from a variety of solutions, and that's what I'll show you, but you can also always start from the DSI front door to create an investigation, whether it's a proactive hunting for risk or reactive dealing with an existing incident. So let's look at the proactive demo. What you're looking at now is that integration that we have with data security posture management that went into public preview also last month. So in all your tenants, you should have this on the left navigation, DSPM, and in DSPM, you get a overall posture of your tenant, which different objectives you can deal with, whether it's generative AI, Copilot, and oversharing or exfiltration. DSI, this integration is specifically with the exfiltration objective. So I click on objective. You can scroll down, like I say, data security posture management is meant to give you your all-up posture, regardless of the data source, whether it's generative AI or collaborative tools. And you can see there's different objectives, like I say, and here we're going to specifically look at the exfiltration objective. And I'm sure it's a problem that none of you have today. And so we show you graphs on how you're doing with times and your scores. And if you scroll down, you get this card that says exfiltration risk patterns. So we're telling you, hey, out of this data that's leaving your tenant, regardless of where it's going, whether it's to a competitor or a public cloud, whatever it is, we start to give you some insights of what data left your tenant. And from there on, you can just simply create investigations, and you'll see this pattern over and over with all the integrations we've done. You give it a name. What's super important is to give it context. What we've learned very quickly with generative AI, and I'm sure you've also seen this in your personal life, when you prompt for generative AI, the better precise you are with your prompt, the better the response is. So here I'm saying, I got an exfiltration issue. Let me look for confidential information and sensitive customer information. And I simply create investigation. And what you're seeing in the screen, then automatically I can navigate to DSI. So from there on, I'm in DSI, left Purview DSPM, and now I'm in data security investigations. And when you can see it already pre-created all that data that exfiltrated your tenant, you can see all the users that exfiltrated data. I can refine this query, I can change the date range, yada. In this case, I'm not going to touch anything. And by the way, so one questions I get a lot, DSI can analyze anything under M365, where you'll see in some of the demos later, we can look at Copilot, we can look at OneNote, yes, we can look at Teams, emails, Vivio Engage, and the list goes on. So here I got a data set. I can see, this is again about 4,400 items, about 200 MBs of data. And, it gives me a sense of the volume, and I can, if I want less data or I'm missing data, I can go back to the pre-built query and refine that. And what I do is then after that, I just commit that data to start doing that deep analysis at AI speed. So here I've got a pile of data. Ended up when I pull the data about 5,700 items. And typically the first thing I need to know as an investigator is, it's a pile of thousands of documents. Can you kind of categorize that data so it makes sense of what kind of risks are there? So one of the first things we give you in DSI is this notion of categorizing the data. Think of categories, it comes in three shapes. And by the way, you can see here in this demo, in this screenshot that I took in one of my demo tenants, you can see what I was saying earlier. We get chat files, we get JSON files, we get multi-language, and we'll get back to that. If it's text, we can reason over it. So here I'm simply going to click on categorize. And there's three ways to categorize the data. You can use either, let me go back. We have default categories, and we have about 14 default categories from business information, health information, credentials. Or you can do what we call AI suggested categories. So as I start typing, I didn't show you, I kind of went fast, but basically we're learning for that intent. What are you hunting for? Are you hunting for password? Are you hunting for specific business information? So here the query I had in the screen before was confidential. So automatically we expand that and say, well, maybe you want to classify data for public, non-public, or sensitive, or stuff like that. And so here I can select a few, and then the last options you get with categories, we all know you get very specific business need, very specific patterns of data that are specific to your business, whether you're manufacturing, healthcare, government, yada, 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 it doesn't matter. So here we got a secret acquisition called Project Obsidian, and we want to find out if it leaked externally as part of this exfiltration analysis. And then I simply create that. And basically, there's an asynchronous job that runs and it comes back with the analysis. And here you're seeing I've selected a few AI suggested categories. I've selected Obsidian. And then we start giving you a picture out of the 5,000 files. We start putting how many of those match those patterns. And for each categories, when over each one of those, we give you a risk score. So we think, this one, you are looking for that confidential data, that secret acquisition called Project Obsidian, and we've got actually, it's a pretty high score, pretty good match in terms of content that match that pattern. So let me show you a little bit more and dive in. So for each category, which is what you see on the left nav, we also give you a second level of insights, which is great. We found document that talks about Obsidian, but what's also interesting when you're doing that investigation is what are the topics or themes people discuss that's in those documents. And that's what you're seeing here. You see under Obsidian, there's a number of topics. And the first one, it talks about the acquisition of Obsidian. And you can see on the right-hand side more details about that topic, the topic description. What I want to call your attention, which is very, very important, is because the way DSI is built, it's AI native solutions, we can reason over any language. And if you pay very close attention here, there's a Word document in Arabic. Can we reason over Hebrew? Yes. Can we do French? Can we do Korean, Japanese, Mandarin? Yes, it doesn't matter. It's just pure AI magic. So here we've reasoned over non-English content that this document, even though it didn't have a word of English, was talking about the secret acquisition. So again, we give you suddenly a good insights of what was that pile of data that just exfiltrated your tenant. Then what I can do is I can grab all those documents. Again, you're seeing the power of multi-language. There's a little bit of everything here in this data set. And I can take it to the next level of analysis, which is, let me select a few of those documents. In this case, I get 69 documents related to that Obsidian category. And I want to find the exact recommended mitigations for those files that leaked externally. So this is examination, which is another tool set at your arsenal to do that deep content analysis. And here is 3 options. I'll show you another one later in the demo. But basically, I'm gonna ask the DSI, give me a recommended mitigation action for those files related to Obsidian. So I can give it a title. I pick up that job in a few minutes. or longer, depending on the volume of data, it comes back with results. So here what you're seeing is the output of that analysis. So literally we grabbed every one of those documents, whether it's 69 or 1,000, doesn't matter. And then we did a deep content analysis for each one of those. So here, for instance, we got a document in Greek. You can see a team chat right above. We give you a risk score. We give you a risk summary in the language that's your preferred language. So again, it doesn't matter what the source is. We can give you reasoning over it. We tell you what's in it, what's risky. We tell you the mitigation steps. And then this is just a proof in the pudding that this document has no English. For those of you that speak Greek, hopefully it'll make sense to you. And if you didn't know this is Greek, but again, this is one of the demos I always like to show, the power of generative AI, again, with multi-language. So here at Reason, by the way, the box in red means it's talking about that secret acquisition. And with anything with AI, we want to give you confidence into the reasoning. And that's why we added thought process and risk implications. And yes, I can export this if I want to take an offline copy and share that with my leadership team. But guess what? As Claire mentioned, we have a baked-in workflow to mitigate that risk. So I can just select all those files or a subset if I wanted to, and I just simply click Add Selected Doc to Mitigation Plan. And this takes us to the last pillar that Claire introduced in DSI, which is great. I found the crown jewels, but I can't really go home yet till I've dealt with it, because if I just leave it where it is, that means maybe people can continue to access it and do and put the company at risk. So here we got a pretty basic workflow where I can start, change the status of those documents. I can export this if I need to share it with my CISO or whoever chain of command within my organizations. And that wraps up that first demo on how to deal with proactively of potentially I get some exfiltration, what exfiltrated, and what do I need to do next. Let me switch gear and show you the other side of the coin, which is in this case, we have a confirmed incident. And at the end of the day, we still have the same challenge. How do we analyze a big pile of data at AI scale? So here I'm in Purview Insider Risk Management. And I don't know if you're familiar with insider risk management. If you're not, you should definitely get familiar with it. It's a very, very important solution to secure your data security estate. But basically, there's a notion of managing or tracking risk at the user level. You get a notion of alerts, which then graduates to cases. So what you're looking at here is all the cases, and a case typically in RM is at a human level. So a case equals one person. So here I'm going to select a case for Jacob. And, I get a number of things that the RM gives me. Again, it's not meant to be a thorough demo of insider risk management. But one thing insider risk management does is, as the user has risky action, it just grabs a copy of whatever the user is doing, whether it's sending an email, viewing a file, downloading a file, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't know if you can see, but in this case, I got about almost 7,994 files. And again, how many of you can realistically analyze 8,000 files in an hour or less? Humanly impossible, plus those files might be apples and oranges. It might be English, non-English, definitely things I don't speak. So, but the outcome is the same. You're investigating this user. You need to find evidence of bad deed or not. Obviously, if the person's making a mistake, that's okay. If they're truly being intentionally putting the company at risk, then maybe you need to escalate that to legal. So short story, again, I've got a button here, say investigate data security with AI, and you'll see it's the same kind of input form that I showed you earlier with data security posture management. I give it a name, I give it a context, except in this one, I'm looking for credentials and secrets. And I get 9,000 or 8,000 items, click create investigation, and voila. So then it creates that shell, and I can navigate to DSI. I click on the RM case. You can see it gives me information of where the case came from. I can, similar to what I was saying earlier, I can refine that query if I wanted to, or in this case, because it's all hands on deck, it's an emergency, I'm not going to touch that data. I'm just going to commit all that data for analysis. So now again, we're back into DSI, except here, instead of starting with categorizations, I'm going to show you another way you can do to get an overall look of your data set very quickly. So here you click on the Ask AI, and I'm going to type a natural language queries, something like what type of credentials are most commonly represented in this data set. Again, because all the data that we grab, we do something called embeddings. We can do things like vector search, semantic search, and all that good stuff. And that's why you can type something that's sounds very human, and we run the analysis. So after a minute or so, basically, it doesn't matter if it's 10,000 files, a million files. Very quickly, we give you an assessment of, did we find any of those patterns in this data set? And, it's a very thorough, detailed assessment. Yes, I can download it. But more importantly, you can see there's hyperlinks. So all of those are evidence, and the documents are below supporting evidence of what I was looking for. So I was looking for credentials, and it's telling me, yeah, I found API tokens, I found MFA informations or temporary sessions and privileged access credentials. And that's what I'll show you next. Here you can start seeing, so I get the high-level summaries in seconds. And I also, again, to really get a thorough understanding that this is truly something bad in this data set, or very risky for organizations, will also give you relevant scores. And I can start looking file by file. And again, at each file, we get this notion of an AI summary with a score. And again, in this case, it confirms my biggest fear, which is this individual has touch access very sensitive data. And if he or she shares it externally, I'm in big trouble, because that's pretty much the keys to the castles, to the crown jewels. So the next step that typically I need to do in such workflow is I want to do a password extraction. So I'm going to multi-select all those files. And again, I'm going to click on that examinations button that I showed you earlier, except in this case, I don't care about mitigations. I want to do credential extractions. And that's what you can see, the bottom option that I'm selecting. So I click that, again, a few minutes or more, depending on the size, and voila. In this case, I had 30 items. And you can see for every file, we tell you how many of those credentials we found. We tell you what credentials type are. Then we tell you surrounding snippets. So again, you don't need to read a 10-page document to find that buried password that Christophe tried to sneak in. We give you all the context. And then last but not least, again, we give you the thought process. So you can decide whether this is a true positive or false positive. One thing I want to be clear, this is AI, but AI is not perfect either. And depending on use case, it could be a false positive. And that's why we give you that, so you get the confidence that what you're hunting for is a confirmed risk versus a waste of your time.
Christophe, when
yes.
you have a chance, we have a couple questions.
Okay, let me pause. That's great. Let's go, Renee.
Okay. All right. So, couple questions. Will analyzed data be uploaded / leave company perimeter?
Yeah, so great question. Absolutely not. This is built on the existing Purview 365 stack. So wherever you are, you're in Germany, you create investigation in Germany, and in Go Local Cloud, it stays in Germany. You're in Canada, you create investigations, and that's where your tenant is, and where you decided where to run your cloud infrastructure, that's where the data is. So nothing leaves wherever you configure your tenant, wherever you can do today e-discovery cases, and where you run your Purview. Nothing, absolutely nothing leaves that compliance boundary that's so dear to the Microsoft Cloud. And then the other thing, because I know that I get the same questions, even though we have slides later, is none of that, your data is used to train AI. Absolutely not. This is generative AI. You decide what you want to do. We're not using any of that content. So this abides to the strictest privacy and compliance cloud policies of Microsoft. So great questions.
Okay, I have 2 more questions so far. This is a great one. Is there a way to allow list sites in DSPM? The top risk sites are our own.
So yeah, this is more of a DSPM questions. Yes, I think so. Depending, like in DSPM, there's a lot of different insights, but at least for the exfiltration part, it's all powered with the inside risk management analytics. So I'm pretty sure you can define, to your point, typically your competitors or maybe your consumer, email providers and cloud providers, whatever it is, are typically things you want to look at, because at the end of the day, obviously, if Christoph's sending content to my competitor, that's clearly a red flag. But also Christoph maybe is going to be sneaky and he's going to try to put it into cloud storage, non-compliant, because then he's going to grab that data and then give it to a competitor or whatever he's going to do with it. So absolutely, you can configure those sites in insider risk management for the analytics.
Okay, great, thank you. I have one more question. If you can see it in the Q&A chat, you might want to reread it after I read it out loud. But based on your current install base, do you have any figures around false positive ratios? Could you share an estimate, e.g. organization of 10K, 50K, and 100K employees is expected to have XYZ amount of alerts per day, week, month? Any best practices integrating into SOC and cross-correlating cases with additional log sources, e.g. Defender Suite, Zscaler?
Yeah. So I see the question. So in the first questions, we don't share the figures around false positive, but it would typically what I say in the context of a security incident, if you just find one password, that's already bad. And so a true positive typically justifies the value alone, even though there might be a few false positives. But the one thing I want to stress is, again, this is using embeddings. So we run large language models to prep the data. That's how we can do vector search. And then we run generative AI to do the assessment. So if I go back to the Toyota Motor Company use case, Toyota had found passwords in SharePoint. Finding passwords, I know it sounds very basic, but it's absolutely it's not so easy from a technical perspective. Passwords aren't just defined by regular expressions or keywords. And that's when this type of AI could find it, whereas doing script the traditional way couldn't. So great questions on accuracy and recall and false positive versus true positive. My ask is you try and you see how well this does. Our hunch is this is better than what you have today, and doing nothing is definitely not the option. So definitely try it out and give us feedback. On the questions on SOC, I'll talk about it. Claire talked about it. We're seeing a lot of customers. DSI, one thing I didn't show you because we've already had it since April, but we also natively integrate with Defender XDR. I know the person was asking about a competitor, but I want to be very clear. Already almost for a year, you're in Defender XDR, you get an incident, you got a bunch of mailbox that get breached. You're the SOC analyst. You still need to know what was in those mailbox. Guess what? There's a button to hand off that to DSI to do the thorough analysis to find out was Christoph mailbox that got compromised. It contained secrets, passwords, the Obsidian acquisition, yada, yada, yada. So once I've gathered the assessment, then I know what to do next. So yeah, we have native integrations with Defender XDR today. So definitely try it out. Let me, Renee, let's pause the question. Let me move on the slides, but great question so far. And let's keep moving. So
sounds good.
I found the passwords, I've done the extraction, right? It doesn't matter if the document, the PDF is 50 pages, if it's in Greek or French, it doesn't matter. It found those passwords, period, at AI speed. And typically the next step is, and here again, I can do the usual workflow of the passwords. But one thing we took it a step further when we went general availability last month, especially what's particularly important with password is give me the ability to purge that data. Maybe that data shouldn't be in Christoph OneDrive or shouldn't be in SharePoint or shouldn't be in Christoph's mailbox. It doesn't matter. Just remove it, period, because it's putting the data at risk. Or maybe, again, Christoph made a copy. It just shouldn't be where it is. It's too sensitive. Two things I want to call out that I get asked about. Does this respect litigation hold? Yes. And does it respect data lifecycle management policies? Yes. And by the way, I forgot to mention all the actions that you do in DSI are audited. So we have an extensive watch the watcher mechanism. So at any point, Claire creates an investigation. Christoph does examinations. Christoph does a purge. Christoph blah, blah, blah. We track that. So there's clear accountability of all the actions that the investigator has done during the course of an investigation. So that's the new purge mitigation. But wait, there is more, right? I show you very quickly how you can step through a workflow to, in this case, identify credentials that initiated from an RM incident. The next thing I want to know as an analyst is, great, I confirmed the risk. Those are naughty files putting my company at risk. But the next question is, did René and Claire also view that file? Because I might have started investigation with Christophe. Maybe there's more to that file that I didn't know. So here is a button in DSI, very mundane button called Explore Insights. I can select one file or multiple files, and voila. What you're looking at is for every file. So in this case, I selected 3 files, and I think I got Portuguese and Korean and I think Mandarin. But for every file that you're looking at, we give you all the activities. And here I'm talking about all the N365 audit log activities. So all the SharePoint thing, Christophe touch a file, view a file, download it, copy, blah, blah, blah. Then the next thing we show you for those files, obviously we show the users that perform those activities. So here I selected Claudine. She not only accessed this file, I think it's Korean, but she also modified. And then we take it a step further, which is, let's get a little information from Claudine, but I'll take you to the punchline, which is, where did Claudine log in from? Did she log in from my corporate environment with my managed device? Or no, Claudine logged in from a very risky IP address, nation state, competitor, whatever it is. So how did we pull this off? And basically, again, we got all the N365 audit log in the Sentinel data lake. Then we pull in all the intra audit log. And then we layer on our threat intelligence to paint what IP are potential risky. Because again, if Claire is logging in from our Microsoft laptop from the corporate environment, that's okay. But what this tells you is maybe I started an investigation with one person, but maybe I'm not quite done. I got a bunch of other folks at my organization that maybe are accessing those files with secrets, passwords, or whatever it is. And this tells me that either Claudine is being naughty, or no, Claudine is legitimate employee. She's here in the office, I know for a fact, or she's on vacation, I know that for a fact, but maybe someone breached her account and is impersonating Claudine to steal the company's secrets. Either way, I need to investigate. And that's the power of, leveraging the Sentinel data lake, put in a graph query on it based on that content, and tell you what are all the activities, from whom and from where, around those confirmed risky files.
Christophe,
Okay.
can
Yes.
we ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Okay, so this analysis requires to give the system access to crown jewel data. How is your investigator hardened against API abuse attacks?
API. So the short answer is, to reach GA, we had pretty strict quality bars in terms of securing our infrastructure, securing our API, impersonations, and notifications, yada. So, this has the highest quality bar as any other Microsoft product. And yes, we pen test this to try to break it and GA, so it passed all the tests. Now, I know security is a moving target, and obviously we're testing this every day, and not just us, like third party, to make sure it abides by the highest security standard. So that's what I'll say on securing this. The other thing also that to make sure you understand this is the data security investigation engineering team, which I'm part of. It's the same engineering team that also owns in e-discovery, and we're part of the Purview engineering team as well. So, there's a lot of reuse in terms of best practices and knowledge and expertise to make sure this has the highest standard, because to your point, yes, you can access crown jewels. What else, Renee?
Another is a show of an example question. So yeah, it's up to you. Can you show an example where the identity is an agentic AI using delegated from individual user credentials?
Yeah, so I don't have a demo of that, but I like the way you think. So here we're showing you humans, but I like the, this is where we're heading, which is some of those users are not really users. It could be an agent reading that file with the passwords and then maybe do an exfil to pass it to another agent or to pass it to humans. So I like the way you think. This is definitely, with the agent identity that we're working on with Entra, suddenly potentially those nodes that you're seeing, instead of being Claudine, it might be agent ABCD, whether it's custom agent or a package agent. So this is definitely where we're heading, even though I don't have a demo of it today. So I like the question. It's definitely forward looking.
Great, thanks. That's all we have right now.
Thanks, Renee. But the other thing I want to say, again, this is sitting our Sentinel data lake, and then we do a graph query on this. And, the other questions I got yesterday, I was doing a similar presentation, is how about you also have device information, right? Now, don't just tell me Claudine came from a risky IP, but was she on our iPad? Was she on our company issued desktop? Was she on our iPhone? Yada, yada, yada. So that's something also we're adding. And then the other thing also that people ask is, how about kind of like on that vein of agentic workflow that potentially accessing sensitive data. We're also looking at the Sentinel team to make this extensible, so you can enrich. We have obviously a bunch of basic logs with Entra and 365, but if you want to bring custom audit log as well, this is also something that we're looking at to enable, so that you can enrich this view with additional audit log. Okay, so let's move on to the last demo, and perfect tee up talking about agents. So this is definitely something I'm very excited to share, because it literally was enabled worldwide in your tenant on Tuesday. So if you haven't used DSI, go to purview.microsoft.com/DSI, and there's a new entry on the left called AI Runbooks. And you click there, and basically this is the screen you're seeing. So again, this is our same team that built DSI for human to do an investigation at AI speed. Guess what? We already know, based on customers' questions or feedback, that I want to be able to go home at 5 and maybe let some agentic workflow hunt for risk on my behalf. And maybe I log back in later, or I come back the next day, and I want to kind of see the same assessment that I demoed earlier by clicking through it. So here it's as simple as that. I click on an AI runbook, in this case, credentials, threat, hunt task is the one that we just started with public preview. Again, I can choose a location. I can say everyone in my tenant, or I can say, no, this Christos OneDrive, I'm suspecting foul play, or this SharePoint, I'm suspecting a lot of password, wherever it is. Again, you give it a context, super important. Back to the questions early. If you want to remove false positive, please, please, please always fill in that intent when you're running agents or anything generative AI, because suddenly you'll see your true positive and false positive, or your accuracy and recall suddenly converge. So it's very important to fill in that screen, even though we make it optional. And then I just launched that agentic workflow. And again, I took a couple of screenshots. I was doing this Tuesday night, and it starts crunching. It starts looking whatever you told it to hunt for those risks. It starts to analyze that data, and I skipped a few screens. Suddenly, whatever, every 10th, and here I was jumping between different agentic workflow that I run. So this one was from last week, but basically, eventually it completes, and then you can click on the review what it found. Right? I told the agent to go hunt for those risks, and it comes back with an assessment. And again, I can sort by risk level. I can look file by file. Back to the question early of, give me confidence that the AI is hunting for the risk that I wanted to hunt versus wasting my time with false positive. So here I can look at each file. It tells me a confidence score. Again, the goal is to give you as much information, so you as the human, you feel like the agent is doing what you wanted to do versus wasting your time with false positives. So here, for each file, I can confirm, or I can multi-select. There's a button confirming all and complete. And that's pretty much the agentic workflow. Again, we are just getting started. And so trust me, you know, do you want the agents to do more mitigation actions like a purge? Maybe, or maybe you want the humans to do it. It depends, but we're basically looking at putting the power of agentic workflow pretty much everywhere in Purview. And definitely this is key to DSI, where you need to move fast on those incidents, or proactive, by the way, not just reactive, to make sure your corpus is as clean as possible. And even if you have risky employees that are trying to go rogue, there's nothing they can steal. With that, let me pass it back to Claire to wrap it up.
Thank you, Christophe. Let's go into a getting started demo. First, when we talk to customers about adopting data security investigations, one of the very first questions is always about privacy, data handling, and who can see what. This slide here reinforces the safeguards built directly into the product to give organizations confidence as they run investigations. First, role-based access control ensures the right people have the right level of visibility. DSI has 3 clearly defined roles: administrator, investigator, and reviewer, each with tailored permissions so teams can participate in an investigation without overexposing sensitive data. Everything an investigator does is also fully auditable. Every action across all roles is logged, giving organizations a full trace of how the investigation was conducted. This level of auditability is essential not just for internal governance, but also for regulatory or legal defensibility. Investigation data is also never used to train our AI models. So the takeaway here is simple. DSI is designed from the ground up with privacy, controlled access, and traceability at the center, ensuring teams can investigate sensitive incidents without creating new risks in the process. Next, let's move on to our billing. DSI here, as you can see, offers a pay-as-you-go billing to provide all customers, big and small, with the flexibility, scalability, and cost efficiency they need. DSI uses 2 meters, a storage meter for the data related to investigation, and a compute unit meter for the computational capacity needed to run AI analysis and actions within DSI. To simplify these costs a little further, we've implemented an in-product cost estimator tool that you can see here on the screen to allow customers to forecast costs before running any investigations. To use this cost estimator, you can navigate to the DSI overview page and enter things like the perceived scope of your investigation in gigabytes, and play around with how much AI usage may be required to thoroughly investigate the data. In this case here, I have 1 gigabyte of data to investigate, and I think I can get the outcomes I want with, for example, only 5 vector searches. So the total cost of this specific investigation could only be $20.
And one more thing, this is $20 if you keep the data for a month. If you know, if you're done in a day or 48 hours, then, you know, it's what? $5 divided by 30, and suddenly it's even less than that.
Yeah, I know we had this question in chat. You're only charged per day. So as soon as you delete the investigation, you won't be charged for the storage costs anymore. On the next slide, we can see here our pay-as-you-go usage dashboard. So to manage the usage and cost of using DSI, customers can now find this usage dashboard, which transparently provides visibility into the amount of storage and AI compute being used, and you can filter per investigation as well as see for everything done within DSI. Next, the Azure portal also offers opportunities to set up cost analysis, budgets, automation, cost alerts, and more to help manage and control spending. For example, you can see the accumulated cost, monthly budget, and overage in the screenshot, and also set up alerts that'll let you know once you've spent, for example, 75% of your budget. So your Azure portal really becomes your best buddy when setting up alerts and keeping track of your budget for DSI. Now moving on. Oh,
sorry, Claire, just to add to that, because I think it's super important, and typically a lot of people are not familiar, especially if you come from the M365 world where it's entitlement and you get either E1 or E5 or E3, whatever. So you can go very deep in Azure on doing budgeting and cost forecasting and so forth. The alerting, which is typically the first thing everyone asks, like, tell me when something goes out of bound, when it's, I don't know, 20% of what I would expect or 20%. The alerting is so extensive in Azure, you can even get a phone call. You can get an SMS in addition to an email. So there's definitely a lot of ways to not be caught off guard because something is not what you're expecting in terms of budget. So definitely, if you're not familiar with Azure subscriptions and the ability to all the bells and whistles that you can do, definitely that's my recommendations, is go crazy in alerting and budgeting so you can really have a good handle on this.
All right, that wraps up our presentation. Try DSI today. To get started, visit purview.microsoft.com/DSI. You can also learn the fundamentals at aka.ms/DSI docs, learn all about DSI, and please do not hesitate to share any feedback. Thank you so much for listening in.
Actually, before we,
Okay.
thank
I
you,
was gonna
Claire.
say, we have a couple more questions. Would you like to answer these ones live?
Absolutely, I'm seeing
Okay.
those.
Okay,
but-
I can read them if you want, yeah. Okay, so if I use DSI to investigate an account compromise and identify email messages and files accessed, how might I then flip those results to a data capture, for example, Purview eDiscovery export?
Yeah, so great questions. Like I showed you, you can export the output of that investigations. That's what you could download, for instance, all those examinations, you can download that. The very first thing I did, the AI search that gave me an assessment of the investigation, you can download that. So you can grab all that evidence as you're doing your job as a amazing investigator, and you have that, internally to say, told me to look at this pile of hay. Here, how many crown jewels I found in the pile of hay and how I found it. So there's definitely all that. Yes, we're looking at adding the export of all the content if you wanted it exactly like eDiscovery, but definitely look at what we have today, because we definitely have traceability or lineage of all that analysis that you did, so you can, archive that case and maybe with all the learnings and all the findings you did during your investigation. I'm seeing by the way, another questions that I get also quite a bit, which is, hey, is this going to replace eDiscovery? Absolutely not. We're actually the same engineering team. My peers next door here, I'm in Redmond. We're all on the same team. DSI and eDiscovery is the same engineering team. So we're being very thoughtful. This is not meant to be replacing a legal tool that has been around forever, which is used by legal professionals everywhere. This doesn't do legal hold. It is not meant to be using for that use case. DSI is really optimized for a data security incident. Now with that, there's definitely commonality that you've probably seen for those of you that are familiar with eDiscovery, especially on picking a location for a search, doing a search query. But as soon as I bring that data over to do the analysis, to do things like embeddings and then vector search, then that's where this is just, or the graph that I was showing you. Again, it was optimized for those data security incident. So yes, I want to be very clear, eDiscovery stays, DSI stays, and the goal is to, we think there's room for two solutions for different use case. Pretty much like I was showing you with, I was talking about Defender XDR with insider risk management. Yes, we're going to build bridges. Maybe to the questions earlier, if you find something very bad that Christoph did throughout a DSI investigation, maybe at the very end of the day, you want to hand that off to an eDiscovery case to your favorite legal team, so maybe they can work on the employee dismissal for wrong conduct, because you already done all that analysis. You get all the evidence of all the bad things Christoph did. So it's just a matter of handing all that evidence so the legal team doesn't have to start from scratch, and then they can terminate Christoph for being a bad employee. So great question on eDiscovery, and hopefully I've answered the question that this is not meant to replace, this is meant to augment use cases that eDiscovery didn't do in the past. I think there's also another question that I saw in the chat in terms of cost. So as Claire showed you, we just launched last month. Yes, we give you an estimator, and again, it could be a couple dollars depending on what you do, or it could be more. And yes, we're not going to sit still. And we heard loud and clear that maybe give me an estimate on my corpus of data. Maybe if I point to this SharePoint site or to Claire's mailbox, what would it cost to analyze those assets? So this is definitely the next wave we have on our backlog. Stay tuned, but we're definitely not going to stop at the estimator that we showed you to try to give you confidence that you're not going to break the piggy bank by using this amazing AI analysis. So great questions on cost.
All right, there's quite a few questions that have come through. I see some cost ones. Okay, here. If you have Sentinel, would these logs generated be available there as well if you use the Purview data connectors?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So yeah, when I was doing the graph demo, the risk graph, so yes, you need the Sentinel data lake, and yes, you need the connectors in Sentinel. You need to have the M365 audit log, or Office 365, I think is the connectors call. You need to have the Entra, so it's all documented. So there's 3 connectors that are required to start to paint the graph like I was showing you. And obviously you can bring any data in your data lake, but at least those are the 3 that we need to paint that initial version of the graph. And like I say, we're not going to stop there. So definitely look at the documentations. Now, by the way, we're trying to make this easier because we have a lot of feedback that, hey, I need to go to Defender or actually Azure, then Defender to configure the Sentinel, yada, yada, yada. So we're trying to remove some of that friction of configuring the Sentinel data lake so you can do some of those beautiful graph rendering that I showed you. I'm going to go ahead, Renee. I'm looking at the chat. So there's one question that, hey, is there any specific credit for M365 E5 customers? No, there's no credit. As Claire said, this is pure pay-go. So it doesn't matter if you get E5 or E3 or small business premium, whatever you're licensing, this is pure pay as you go. Is you only pay for what you need during the course of an investigation, whether it's proactive or reactive. So then the next question I go, okay, is there a trial? So yes, we're working on this. Stay tuned. We're potentially be able to trial DSI and feel the love, and then convince yourself that this is another tool, a valuable tool in your arsenal that you need to have to deal with data security incident. Still have 6 minutes.
Yeah, okay. So is there any guidance or best practices for calming the residual fear legal and or human resource departments have about the visibility Purview DSI provides to technical teams? For example, we are adding a confidentiality policy for Purview DSI administrators.
Yeah, so I think to me, there's 2 ways to look at it. Again, tools like content search on e-discovery has been around for ages. And if you give the wrong permission, then someone can search your company CEO, CFO, whatever, or the next door employee that they don't get along with. So what I'm getting at is, yes, we have role-based access, we audit it, but there's also a process that you need to have in place. And I've seen organizations when they're investigating someone, even though they have the tool, they have the permissions, yada, 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 they still need to maybe ask their legal counsel for approval. Yes, I get the approval to investigate Claire, and then I can just go and look at all the things she did hunting for risk. So what I'm getting at is we have all the knobs and the tools, and we can add more, but there's also a process in place to this excellent question, because back in the days, or you could already get in trouble with giving the wrong permissions to e-discovery, and suddenly you get someone that can look at any content, leave aside DSI. So great questions on putting a process in place to make sure this is not abused and it's used for the right use case, it's justified, and voila. And by the way, you can say that about many solutions in Purview. I work on communication compliance. You can configure a policy, you just look at one employee. If you get permission to do so in communications compliance, and then you can see every chat, every email that employee did. So again, maybe there should be a process in your organizations before you go willy-nilly on some of those communication policies, e-discovery case, or DSI investigations. So great questions of, we have a tool, we think we've got all the bells and whistles, all the knobs, to give you confidence to make sure it's operated properly, but I do also think there's a process that's needed that you need to tailor to your own organization to make sure it's always used for the right purpose.
Thanks. I see there's a question that had quite a few upvotes that I missed. So it says, can you cap the activity that the DSI agents will generate to limit resulting costs?
Yes, so yes, not in the version that you get access, but absolutely, this is a very good questions. Very good question. Yes, you can be able to tell the agent to not go rogue, or it's not unlimited. And by the way, it's the same thing with DSI. You can cap how many units you want to consume every hour. So absolutely, and not in this version, but definitely by the time we get to GA, you'll be able to control that. And by the way, the unit, I don't know if that got asked, but I get that questions. For anything agentic workflow in Purview, the unit is security compute units, SCU. And I want to reiterate that because the units, as Claire showed, we use in DSI is DSI compute units. So sorry about the confusion, different terminology, different cost, different burn rate. At the end of the day, leave aside the units. Everyone's using the same stack. We're going to Azure OpenAI to reason over the data, whatever you're doing. So it just happens to be for different use case, different burn rate, different units. But yes, the agents, when we release it, you can definitely have some control over the burn that they're going to incur.
All right, do you have time for one more?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Great crowd.
Other than Sentinel, what other data endpoints are available to DSI?
Then Sentinel, what's the second part of the question, Renee?
Sorry, what other data endpoints are available to DSI?
Oh, whatever data endpoint. So I'm trying to understand. There's different ways to read that questions. Let me parse a little bit. So again, there's a data lake. We paint a graph. So yes, you're able to add more data when you're doing that graph that I showed you. For DSI today in GA only looks at M365 data. Now, I'm saying this is for GA, for general availability. We're not going to stop there. And we absolutely know that outside of M365, there's an infinite number of places that potentially you want to investigate. Is it a CRM data? Is it an ERP data? Is it another storage data set? Is it structured, unstructured? Is it on premises? You tell me. And this is where I might ask, you got the email here. You tell me what would be your wish list to Santa, or whatever non-M365 data source you'd like DSI to analyze. Then there's another thing I want to give you is we are working on potentially, since you mentioned endpoint, on analyzing endpoint DLP alerts. So stay tuned for that. But this is definitely something that we've been asked for a lot of customers, which is endpoint DLP generates a lot of alerts. And I get a copy of the content that Christophe was trying to manipulate on his iPhone or Android phone. I need to, again, see what is that content that is manipulated. Is he leaking confidential thing, or is just goofing around or making a mistake on his phone? And that's okay. So endpoint DLP is something we're going to integrate with. And the last part of that question is, if you have data in a CRM, non-Microsoft, Azure, it doesn't matter, or a code repo. I've seen this use case with DSI. And you want to analyze that content at scale. Well, guess what? Get the API or download that content. And then the workaround today is you can create a dedicated SharePoint site in DSI, upload that pile of text, wherever it's a gigabyte, terabyte, a million of files, doesn't matter, and then run the analysis against the SharePoint location. So that's the workaround today for data that doesn't live in M365. As you can see, I'm pretty passionate. I'll stop talking. I'll let Renee wrap this up, but you guys have been great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christophe and Claire, for being our guests today and for sharing the great information with our community. For those of you who have additional questions on the topic we just covered, please feel free to raise them on the Microsoft Tech Community discussion space. Just go to aka.ms/Purview Community. To all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.securitycommunity/security community. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. Thank you for being part of our community and for joining us on this webinar. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.